So good morning, everybody. This is the latest HIIT workout, and today's topic is megatrends and PESTLE. And this is an interesting area because if you talk to somebody about megatrends, everyone thinks it's these really big transformational things that are happening in the world, and how can you possibly map them or make sense of them? Well, we're going to try and do that today through a range of different tools and frameworks. And as always, the approach we take is about applying them. So for those that are new, not come across us before, we're intensive marketing. We work, as you can see, from left to right with corporates, helping their corporate innovators and their product teams, with startups and scale-ups. Also work with the University of Oxford incubator for their startups. And then on the far right, I act as a trustee for a small charity that supports vulnerable elderly people with a rare brain condition. It's probably my favorite activity. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to cover kind of megatrends and PESTLE and deconstruct it. And it's a commonly used model, but often misused. I'm going to introduce something called Change Horizons. And it's kind of how you project change over the long term, and we'll understand what that means. As always, we talk about what it informs and what it informs it, where it fits into the overall scheme of your planning. And then we'll go back and reconstruct the mega trend and the growth horizon using a contemporary example. As always, your feedback's really valuable. There's a Menti code. It's 3 questions, menti.com, 25 61 31, and you'll be asked 3 things. It takes 2 minutes. I'll remind you at the end anyway. As always, use chat. It's great. Capture your questions as we go along. We do Q&A at the end anyway, but it's always useful to capture those things as we move forward. So let's get into it. So really, what are megatrends? These are external factors, typically outside of your control. And so back in the day, I think probably when I was doing my A-level business studies, it was a PEST model that was used to make sense of these. And it broke up those factors into, as you can see, political, economic, social, and technological. I think by the time I'd actually got to be doing my business degree, they realized that they needed to change that, and so they turned that into the SLEPT model. But the key thing here being, it's not what the words are, it's what you do with them. And then by the time I got to getting people through their marketing diplomas, we're up to the PESTLE model. And again, same thing applies. These models only really work when you apply them to your context and you make sense of them. And the way to make sense of them is to understand what goes in, the impact, the immediacy, and the implication. And I'm going to give you an example of that using Microsoft in just a moment. So typically, we get to this PESTLE model. Now I know there are other ones that have come out. There's Steeple, there's Deep List, but fundamentally, it doesn't matter how many letters you have. It's kind of what you do with the categories and what you do with the content that goes in. Now, if I was to be running a workshop and we say, right, okay, let's think about what those external factors are and those mega trends. Let's use a PESTLE model, and I explain that it's got political, economic, and societal, and whatever else. You can put it up on the wall or do it using some really cool collaboration tools today online, and you'll get this sort of stuff. Political, I can guarantee it'll be Trump. Economic, recession, legal, Brexit, technical, blockchain, AI. You know, these things are pretty useless if that's all you're putting into this model. This model is really just how you compartmentalize stuff and make sense of it. So this isn't really that useful. Whereas if you was to take this model and think about it from a Microsoft perspective and make your factors meaningful and applied, you then can assess what the impact is, what the immediacy is, and what the implication is for you as a business. Because the reality is, when you start looking at these factors and you start applying them, you start to realize that these are the things that are going to give you opportunity and threat. And typically, whilst you can't control them, you can control what you do to respond to them. So let me give you a couple of examples of Microsoft. I suspect that increasing US influence in the storage and safe use of US citizens' personal data is something that they're tracking. I imagine that from a Microsoft point of view, the leveling of low-cost economies for IT technology and talent outsourcing is something that they're tracking. What do I mean by that? That you've got somebody in Vietnam who's as equally capable as somebody in Silicon Valley, yet they're a tenth of the cost. How does that work out? What's happening with increasing acceptance of gaming and augmented reality across generations? We're now gamifying across all of the spectrum of ages in our society. And the fact that artificial intelligence, AI, are moving out of extreme into mainstream, and people are seeing them as actually helpful things, like a bot when they're booking their train ticket. When cryptocurrency is going to become, over time, actually a formal way of doing trading or blockchain. And as we're moving to cloudify everything, what happens? And we're already heating up the planet. We're piling more servers. What are we going to do there? So I would imagine Microsoft might be looking at those simple letters with this kind of applied insight. Now, what might they do? Let's have a little think about what they do. So for each factor, they're thinking about the immediacy, the impact, and the implication. How quickly is it going to happen? How big is it going to change my business? What big opportunity is it going to be? How quick, how important, and what we do. So what did Microsoft do? Well, increasing acceptance of gaming across generations. Well, they went and bought Minecraft. Fantastic. They tapped into not only a huge gaming community, but it's a way that children and future talent is coming into the world. And if you think that technology is going to be eating up the world in terms of the way we do stuff and permeating everything we do, we need more and more people who are technology native. They grow up understanding how it works and how to use it. And there's another example of that in just a moment. The next one is kind of AI and crypto and blockchain. And this is something they've done in one of their products called Azure AI. They're providing tools and facilities and training for other people to take advantage of making these technologies come into the mainstream. Now, we can't be talking about Microsoft and US influence on storage and safe use of US citizens' personal data if we're not talking about TikTok. Now, this is a really good example of immediacy and impact. No one was talking about this 6 months. They are now, and we know what the impact is. And the implication for Microsoft is that they missed the social cycle. They missed Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. And they've had to buy LinkedIn for 28 billion, and they may now buy TikTok. But that puts them front and center into business and business to business and business to consumer opportunity. So it's a really good example of how it can really provide an opportunity. And this is my favorite, getting away from all this corporate stuff. Make code. How what they're doing is, like, they started off by trying to put a PC on the desk of everybody in the world. They want to make every kid in the world the ability to make code. And it's a massive free program. It's wonderful. Okay, by the way, I'm not a Microsoft zealot. I'm actually an Apple fanboy. But the point is, you understand how they adapt their plans and their strategy as a result of using the tool appropriately. Now, one of the other things I want to share with you is using horizons to understand change. So some of you may be aware of a growth horizons model that McKinsey did, which is kind of across the top, how you develop your emerging businesses and how you look to the future. We can't possibly do that unless you're looking at growth or change horizons. And the key thing about change horizons is that most of this stuff is inevitable. It's going to happen. But what is it that gets us along there? It's what I call the instruments of change. So yes, we might want to get to a climate-free society by 2050, but how do we get there? Well, one of the instruments could be we accept that we get food delivery from a little robot dog. And then we start accepting that we can have lots of things delivered by drones. And also we realize that as a society, we're okay with that. We don't need as many fossil fuel consuming freight trucks on the road. That's going to help us to have sustainable supply chains. That's going to make a massive impact to our 2050 zero emissions. Now, the interesting thing about instruments of change and these horizons for change is that you kind of think about it in terms of the short-term stuff is changing behaviors. It then kind of changes industries, because industries can then change societies. And it can be a little bit iterative, but fundamentally, we change industries, we can change societies. Now, the horizons at the top in terms of the lengths, clearly, if you're doing this for your own purposes, you are do them based on the appropriate timeline for your business. As always, where does this fit in? So PESTLE is a useful model, but you need to feed it with your strategic direction, probably market research, probably trend spotting and your internal SWOT, like the McKinsey 7S we did in the last workout. And of course, it's going to inform where to play, your strategic plans, probably maybe the investments you make and the research and development you might do. And as we just heard, it can well inform your mergers and acquisitions. So a couple of minutes left, let's reconstruct that growth horizon. How might we plot those instruments of change? So the key thing that I said earlier was many changes are actually inevitable. So if we take a typical change to the way that we move around as society, we know that that's going to change over the long term. But what are the instruments that are going to enable that? And this is quite an interesting thing to do. So yes, we can look at the big picture mega trends, but how do you break it down and make sense of what it means to you in the short term and what to focus on? So let me try and do this. Let me try and do this with a really big one, which is mobility change horizons, the future of mobility, how we will change in society by the way we get around, or even maybe not get around. So let me start first of all with stuff that we might know, and that is using cars. So we might change our behaviors, and we probably are right now, because trust me, we'll be doing home test drives and virtual reality shopping as a result of the COVID crisis. But what actually might happen in the industry, we start moving from, you know, buying a car on a subscription, not this big lumpy purchase. Also, the cars becoming really, really reliable. They don't really need servicing. And actually, we're going to move to electric cars anyway. And you add all of those factors up, those instrumental factors, we could end up with never owning a car or no car dealers. Because in the future of mobility, it may be a multimodal form of transportation. Well, that's not just one thing, that's one thread. There are probably 20 threads to the future of mobility. And actually, those that are in the industry know these as the ACEs: autonomy, connectivity, electrification, and the whole range of services around it. Let me give you another one. So Horizon 1 might be in-car technologies. We can start to get used to Apple CarPlay. We start to adopt 5G. That's a key technology, but we adopt it, then we need to open up data permissions. All of a sudden, we start to have connected cars, because cars can't really talk to each other unless they've got 5G, and we allow them to do so. Then we need to improve our sensor technology, both in terms of lowering the cost and increasing the sensitivity. We need to sort our road infrastructure. And then at that point, whilst we've got Waymo driving around San Francisco or California desert, that's okay. And we might have Oxbotica doing some stuff in Milton Keynes, but it's not pervasive in society. It has not changed society. In order for it to change society and be transformational, all of these things need to come together over time. And so this is a really good way of understanding how you take a really big mega trend, like the future of mobility, and deconstruct it and understand the little contributing factors and their impact and their immediacy and the implications. Okay, so that was it for this week. Just a quick shout out. Next workout will be on OKRs. So I get this quite a lot, you know, OKRs, how to use them, how do they work? Again, another simple thing, but done incorrectly is not always useful. So we're going to go through OKRs. You can contact me on my email if you want to talk about how these could be applied to your business, a bit more detail. Look at the website, full range of services is on there. And one last thing, please go on to Menti, 2 minutes. What could be better? What worked? Any ideas and models and themes for future workouts? I've got my ideas, but to be honest, I've responded to lots of yours. So that's it. Right now, I will thank you for your time and attention and wish you a great rest of the day.